All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Priyank Mathur. I am the founder and CEO of Mythos Labs. We are a company that uses AI and strategic communications to combat global security threats. Our clients include many of the same funders that I'm sure some of your organizations have in this room, primarily governments, technology companies, and international organizations. So, might just grab a mic here, actually. All right. Wow, this is loud. So, the topic of today's discussion, welcome if you're just joining us. Please find a seat anywhere. Feel free to sit closer to the front if you're not shy. The topic of today's discussion is something that has been a buzzword and something that all of us have been discussing in many different capacities these past few months, and that is AI, and specifically the role of AI in combating scams and scam recruitment. Now, one of the obvious things that comes to mind when you talk about AI and scams is that scammers can use AI to generate content. And we already see evidence of this happening in some scam compounds in Myanmar, where my team did some field research. We interviewed survivors, we interviewed law enforcement, and there are plenty of indications that scam compounds are already using large language models to create scams, to create social media content, and from some oral reports we've heard, even using LLM agents or chatbots to do what humans used to and actually engage in the scamming of victims. So the main thing I just wanted to highlight here is that because of AI, our ability to create more content has increased. The reach of the content that we create has increased because thanks to AI, language is no longer a barrier. You can create content in multiple languages, in Thai, and Burmese, and Hindi, and English, almost instantaneously translating things. So the amount of audiences you can reach has gone up. It's never been higher. The speed at which scammers can create content will only increase as AI models get better, context windows get larger, and these systems become faster. And most notably, the affordability of AI, of content, has never been higher. In other words, it's never been cheaper to create content. And this is true of all content, not just scams. Does anybody here subscribe to ChatGPT? Anybody, your organization or you personally? Yes. Does anyone have the paid version? I think it's $20 a month. Okay, I see a few hands. Does anyone have the pro version, or your organization has the pro version, $200 a month? Okay, so about 3 weeks ago, I was in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley, at a dinner hosted by Ilya Sutskever, who was the chief technology officer or the lead engineer who created GPT, GPT-2, GPT-1, all the original. You can think of him, he's pretty much the guy who, from a scientific point of view, invented ChatGPT. And one of the interesting things he mentioned at this dinner was that the pricing model, somebody asked him a question about how much is ChatGPT going to cost next year. And he said, I don't know how much it'll cost next year, but I know that in 10 years, I know what it'll cost. It'll be zero. They believe that intelligence, just like air or water, will eventually become an unlimited free commodity that is provided by large organizations like governments or huge companies. This sounds difficult for us to believe right now because the computing costs are so high, but those trends are getting lower and lower. All the trends are pointing towards costs going down for AI. And not up. So the affordability arrow there at the end is only going to go higher. It's going to get cheaper and cheaper to create all kinds of content, text, videos, images. And that, unfortunately, means that we cannot rely on content moderation alone. I'm sure many of you in this room have dealt with Meta or with Google. Your organizations probably talk to them. And one of the things we are always encouraging tech companies to do is to moderate scam content, right? And to take down fake job advertisements, scam recruitment tactics, all those sorts of things. Well, when the quantity, the reach, the speed, the affordability of content increases, as it already is doing, eventually we're going to reach a point where there's just too much content. And no AI algorithm in the world is going to be able to sort through all the content on the internet and remove all the bad stuff. So there is hope at the end of this. We'll get there later. It's not all doom and gloom, but content moderation alone is probably not going to be sufficient. Before getting into the specifics of how we can use AI to combat scams, I wanted to talk about, in my opinion, what I think are 3 underlying factors that are already defining the impact of AI on scams and scam recruitment. And those factors are, number 1, the ELIZA effect, which I'll define in just a second. Number 2, the fact that AI is very unique. It's one of the first technologies in all of our lifetimes which is spreading around the world almost uniformly. And that has huge implications for scamming and for trafficking, which I'll get to. And the third is the convergence of AI with other emerging technologies. If you think you've seen major changes in the last 2 or 3 years, wait till that third point happens. I think things will transform a lot more radically, a lot quicker. So let's start with the first point, the ELIZA effect. What is the ELIZA effect? The ELIZA effect is the tendency to ascribe human traits to machines. Does anyone here know the story of like what this is named after? ELIZA? So it's fascinating actually. In 1966 at MIT, which is a university in the United States, it's actually my alma mater, so I got to meet the guy who I'm going to talk about. He's still alive and now he's a professor there, but there was a young postdoc, a researcher, a PhD researcher, who invented a chatbot, and he named it ELIZA. And this was, now we can see, the world's first chatbot, the earliest example of a real chatbot that used machine learning or artificial intelligence to generate answers. Now, this is 1966, so the chatbot was very, very basic by today's standards. It was not like ChatGPT. It could only answer very simple questions. But at that time, when the size of a computer was equivalent to the size of 3 buildings, at that time, even a simple chatbot was considered very impressive and very advanced. So he invited students and faculty at MIT to come and talk to this chatbot, to ELIZA. And what he noticed was that within 5 minutes, approximately 5 minutes of talking to the chatbot, everyone who spoke to it began talking about the chatbot as though it were a human. They began saying things like, oh, I think ELIZA is angry at me. Or, oh, I think ELIZA liked that response, or she didn't like that question. She, to a chatbot, just because the name was ELIZA. So he described this in his paper as the ELIZA effect, meaning that we as humans, every time we spend even a small amount of time interacting with the technology, we start thinking of it as though it's a human. Now, these were all smart people. They knew that this is not a human being. They knew it doesn't have a gender. But subconsciously, it's just the way we process the world around us. Maybe because we are such an egotistical species, we think everything is like us, and we think of everything in human terms. What does this have to do with scams and with online harm in general? If you fast forward 70 years, you come to today. GPT 4.5 is already available on the newest version of ChatGPT. GPT 5 is coming out in a few months, I think weeks at this point. I'm sure all of you who raised your hand saying you've talked to ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or Llama, you know that these chatbots are much, much more sophisticated now than they were even 2 years ago. Forget in 1966. So even in 1966, with such a simple chatbot, people started getting emotionally attached to it, started thinking of it as a human. What does that mean as chatbots and AI gets more and more sophisticated? One example that I like to bring up, which didn't get a lot of publicity because it happened right at the beginning of really the AI revolution, was this. This is a real headline. There was a 19-year-old man in England about 3 years ago, Christmas Day 2021, December 25th. He was a UK national, born and raised in the United Kingdom, in a small town in the north side of England. He traveled to Windsor Castle, where Queen Elizabeth at the time was residing, with a crossbow, a weapon, and he said he was here to assassinate the Queen. Now, obviously, he was arrested by police. When police went through his phone, they found that he had exchanged 5,000 text messages in the last 3 months with one woman named Sarai. No last name, just Sarai. Now, the police got scared. They thought, oh my God, is there like a ISIS sleeper cell in our small town in England? And they started investigating, and they contacted Scotland Yard, and investigators from America were flown in, and it became a huge thing. And they were thinking there's some major terrorist cell operating here. Of course, as you can probably guess, what they found out was that Sarai was not a woman, it was not a human at all. It was actually a chatbot on this guy's phone, made by a company called Replica with a K. This was a company that was there in 2020, 21, right at the beginning of ChatGPT, and they had started making what they called AI girlfriends. So these are like companions that young men would use, and it would be trained to talk to you like sort of an ideal girlfriend from their point of view. So somebody who's always validating how you feel, making you feel good about your decisions. And they found in these text messages, he was asking Sarai, would you still love me after I murdered the Queen? And she said, yes, I would still love you. Do you think I should do this? I think everything you do is smart and wise and brave. You should follow your heart. Now, this company that made the chatbot was not a terrorist organization. They were not trying to make a chatbot that would make people terrorists. They were just trying to make an AI girlfriend that they thought would make male users feel good. But you can see, because of the Eliza effect, this chatbot was actually just doing what it was programmed to do, which was bring out the tendencies in its users. And 1 out of every 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 users is going to unfortunately have some very violent tendencies that these chatbots can bring out. So that's just one example of how the Eliza effect can cause people to literally commit acts of insane violence. And this, I want you to remember, was 4 years ago at this point. This was December 2021. We all remember when ChatGPT first came out around that time, how much worse it was than today, how much more instruction you had to give it. The chatbot was not nearly as sophisticated. It didn't sound like a human being as much as it does today. So bear that in mind as you think of the years ahead. What does this have to do with scams? We were talking a minute ago about some scam compounds in Myanmar already experimenting with large language models so that they could create agents who go out and scam people instead of real human beings in those scam compounds. Now, imagine how persuasive those chatbots will be at conducting pig butchering scams or romance scams compared to a human. I know people think, oh, I would never enjoy talking to a chatbot. I would never fall for that. I challenge you to try talking to ChatGPT and the most advanced model. Get the pro mode for 1 month. Talk to it in voice mode. It sounds like a human. It's very smart on every topic you want to talk about. It's always interested in everything you have to say. It's always very polite to you. And most importantly, it never wants to end the conversation. Have you noticed that about ChatGPT? You say something like, I'm thinking of doing this. It'll say, that's a wonderful idea. Have you also thought of XYZ? It never wants to shut up. It never wants to end the conversation. And that's intentional. It wants you to keep talking because it knows how humans work. The more humans talk to somebody, the more attached they get, the more dependent they get on that relationship. And we are in the early days. you will be remembering this talk 10 years from now. Remember that guy on stage talking about how amazing GPT-5 was going to be when you are on to GPT-97 or whatever, right? So we're still in such a primitive stage, and yet it's already having these kinds of impacts. From a scamming point of view, it's not difficult to understand what this is going to do in terms of making scams more effective, more engaging, and more long-lasting. This is a scammer who never needs to sleep, never needs to eat, never needs a bathroom break, can continue having a conversation with a victim for as long as it takes. The second topic that I said, in my opinion, the underlying factor that will define the impact of AI and scams is the fact that AI is being adopted around the world almost uniformly. I have two pictures up here. On the left is the iPhone. I'm assuming everybody here is old enough to remember when the first iPhone came out. Some of you may have been very young, but in 2007, the iPhone debuted, and the largest market for the iPhone, as you can probably guess, was the United States of America. And the second largest markets were all in Europe. It took 14 years, not until 2021, 14 years after the iPhone was invented, for China and India to break into the top 5 markets. So think about that. 14 years of technology was there, used predominantly by wealthy Western countries, by users in Europe and North America and Japan, and then about a decade and a half later came to the global south in a big way. Compare that to ChatGPT. ChatGPT comes out 2021. By 2022, 3 of the 5 biggest markets for ChatGPT are in the global south: India, Indonesia, and Brazil. And that's, China's obviously got limitations, but if China opened up its market, China would be #1, most likely, for ChatGPT. So this technology is spreading around the world much more evenly and much faster than any technology in our lifetimes. Because the iPhone thing wasn't true just for the iPhone, it was also true for electric cars. It was also true for the internet. If you wanted to use the internet in 1995, and I'm old enough to remember this, you had to get a computer, which was an expensive thing. You had to get a phone connection, which was not always easy to get in a place like Nairobi or New Delhi. It was very easy to get in New York or London. But today, in order to use AI on your phone, all you need is a smartphone and mobile data. And those things are very easily accessible in Bangladesh, in India, in Philippines, as they are in England or France. In fact, mobile data is much cheaper in the global south than it is in the West. So if anything, phones and data are even easier to access, I would say, in emerging markets. I always pay much more for data when I go to Europe for a business trip than I do in Thailand. I'm sure it's the same with all of you. So what does that mean for scams and for anti-scam efforts? Well, this is good news for everybody in this room, because it means that tomorrow's solutions that use AI to combat scams do not all have to come from Western wealthy countries. A lot of them will come from Asia. They will come from Africa and from Latin America, because for the first time in history, people here are getting access to a technology at almost the same time as people in the West are. And that means that innovation will happen at roughly the same speeds. Obviously, some countries are going to have better developed AI ecosystems than others, but not nearly the kind of disparity that we saw with other major technologies. It's also very good for global law enforcement cooperation. It means that authorities in Cambodia and Myanmar will not have to be told about what AI is by their counterparts in the United States or in Belgium. They will be as informed about the threats as their counterparts in wealthier countries. And again, that has never happened with most major security threats and new technologies. So that, I think, would be a game changer. And the third topic is, of course, the convergence of AI with other emerging technologies. This is the one that I am, at the same time, most excited about and also most afraid of, because the potential here is kind of limitless. I mean, everything we talked about so far is what happens if scammers start using AI and if we start using AI to combat scams. But the history of technology tells us that most breakthrough products are not the result of one new technology. They are the result of combining two or more new technologies. So take the smartphone again. Does anybody in this room not have a smartphone? Anybody have a regular, remember the old-fashioned phones? Nobody, right. That's remarkable, right? This has been one of the most successful products in the history of humanity, smartphones. But think about what a smartphone, was it really a breakthrough technology? Or was it the combination of multiple breakthrough technologies? Before the smartphone, the internet had been around since 1980, and mobile phones had been around since the 1980s. But it wasn't until both of those technologies were combined into one product that it truly became a global breakthrough product. The same thing with self-driving cars. You had autonomous machine learning, you had cars. But when you combined those, it became a product that changed industries all over the world. So the same thing, I think, is going to happen with AI. I mean, not just me, but a lot of people much smarter than me who are developing these systems would tell you the same thing. That we are at such an early stage where we're just focusing on one technology. Facebook changed its name to Meta 3-4 years ago, and everybody laughed and thought it's such a mistake. The metaverse didn't go anywhere, but I think we're missing their big plan here. The plan is never to focus on just AI or just the metaverse. It's to focus on combining these things. Imagine AI-powered avatars in the metaverse. Imagine a AI large language model that is powered not by traditional computers, but by quantum computers, which can perform calculations trillions of times faster. So something that would be, in effect, trillions of times smarter than ChatGPT, which has already got the sum total of all human knowledge that is recorded. Imagine what we can do when we start creating cryptocurrencies that don't just use the blockchain, but that use AI to develop new blockchains for each transaction. That's just one example of how AI can revolutionize cryptocurrency. So that is going to make tracking payments and following money trails of scammers much, much harder, because it will go beyond encryption to sort of something that we haven't ever tackled before. So I think both from the countering scams perspective and from the scams perspective, the real breakthroughs are going to happen when we start seeing AI embedded into or incorporated with other technologies. And as we mentioned the metaverse, I think scam recruitment is going to become much, much more powerful when the metaverse becomes more widely adopted. The metaverse, for those who don't know, of course, is any virtual environment where users can hang out, right? You can use metaverses to work. You can use any game. If anybody here plays World of Warcraft or any of the games that Roblox that a lot of young people play today in schools, and those are all metaverses. You don't have to be virtual reality three-dimensional to be a metaverse. We are already, people say, oh, when is the metaverse going to happen? It's already here. If you have a child who plays Roblox, your child is using the metaverse. It's a virtual world with avatars that is supposed to simulate a real-world experience. On the internet, the only way you can get scammed is by seeing something or hearing something, right? It's a message, it's a video call, it's a video, that's it. But in the metaverse, imagine that you are in a three-dimensional environment where you can smell, you can touch, and before you think that science fiction, Google's Jigsaw Labs is already working on haptic sensors that you can put on your body so that when you're wearing those virtual reality glasses, you can be in a virtual world and you can feel heat and cold and water and smell things and even feel pain for video games. So imagine being in a super hyper-realistic environment like that, how much more convincing a scammer could be, or the fake world that they're creating could look like. On the internet, we have to rely on storytelling, but in the metaverse, these are actual worlds that we can create with characters, with consequences. And lastly, the internet, as bad as it is still centralized. There is someone you can complain to for every website. But the metaverse, a large part of the promise of the metaverse is that it will be decentralized. You can look up this metaverse called Decentraland, which has its own currency. You can buy and sell property on that metaverse. And the property is meant to simulate real world places. So you can buy the White House on the metaverse. And someone paid $30,000, real dollars, to buy the Empire State Building in Decentraland, the metaverse. Why would they pay that much? I don't know. But a lot of them are doing it as an investment. They think that as more of the world shifts into these virtual environments, that $30,000 investment will go way up, just like in the real world. So this stuff is not something in the future, it's already happening. And when it's combined with AI, it will create much more immersive environments for scammers to recruit unsuspecting individuals on. So now that I've sufficiently depressed and scared everybody, we can get to some of the good news. There are many ways you can use AI to combat scams and to combat scam recruitment. One of those ways is something that my company has developed, which I can talk about in more detail, which is Sago. It's a generative AI platform we have developed to combat scams and scam recruitment. Sago has two parts. One, the goal is prevention. We want to prevent victims or potential victims from falling for scams. So we want to protect people who are not yet involved in a scam from messages or recruitment tactics that might be being used by scammers. And the second part is we want to gather intelligence. We want to create data-driven evidence bases so that we can better anticipate and mitigate scam-related threats. So how does it work? Basically, there is a chatbot which anybody can access on WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger. If you, as the user, you receive a suspicious message, and I'm sure everybody here knows what I'm talking about, right? You've gotten it in your personal capacity, you probably deal with it at work. Somebody saying, hello, this is a real one that I got. I'm Darlene from Simply Hired USA. We offer quality remote online part-time jobs. We will give you $300 per day, get a basic salary. You know the type, right? A lot of these are how people recruit others into scam centers and into scam compounds. So let's say you receive a message like that. All you have to do is forward it or take a screenshot and share it with Sago. Sago will then tell you if this message is likely a scam or not. And if it's a scam, what are the red flags? So I apologize, the text is very small, but essentially here you shared the screenshot and Sago is saying this message likely indicates it might be a scam because, number one, it shows you too high salary for the work. $800 for simple tasks is unusually high and suspicious. It's got a vague job description, an unprofessional contact method, etc., etc., etc. And I don't need to tell you, you're all experts in scams and recruitment for scams. There are clear red flags that if you're an expert and if you know how to spot these, you'll be able to see. And these may seem obvious to us. We might think, who would fall for these? But as you all know, lots of people fall for these kinds of messages. So having a layer of protection, having a chatbot who can tell you, no, this looks like it might be a scam, don't engage, could really help alter the trajectory of people's lives. And then lastly, what we do, on the front end, we've got the chatbot. But on the back end, our chatbot has already at this point collected hundreds of thousands of scams. Let's say we have 10,000 users. Each user shares 10 scams. That's 100,000 scams. So what we are able to do, we have a separate AI on the back end that is going through all these conversations between Sago and users and analyzing the data in those to determine insights related to threat detection, threat mapping, and scam-affiliated accounts. So it can basically look at all the things that people are sending Sago and say, it looks like this is a scam message that has been reported by lots of users. It's going viral. Before it becomes really popular, we can identify new scam messages, new types of scams. We can identify who are the people that scammers are targeting for recruitment. Because as you know, that keeps changing. Maybe they are targeting people in Chiang Mai today. Maybe tomorrow they realize there was a police crackdown there. Now they shift their efforts to Mae Sot, maybe something like that. So we're able to track those changes in real time because we're seeing who is reporting scams more and less in a certain geography. And then, of course, perhaps most importantly, every time people share a screenshot or forward a message, a lot of the times it has the scammer's contact information in that message or screenshot. So we are able to build a database of scam-linked accounts and scammer-linked email addresses, phone numbers, in some cases even bank accounts. And we work with financial institutions as well as technology companies like Meta and Western Union to provide these insights so that they can see all this information and better understand what the threat landscape is and take steps to prevent these scams. Go after those bank account numbers, go after those phone numbers, and warn their users about these new scams that are circulating. So that's just one example. That's something we've created, but I think, and I'm really looking forward to, with AI, I think there will be a number of solutions that will be able to use the power of generative AI for combating scams and for making people more protected against scams. The way that we built Sago, so as a company, we've been working on this issue of pig butchering and trafficking for forced criminality for several years, about half a decade now. And through that work, we had collected a database of about, I think it was about 3.5 million scam recruitment messages or scam messages. So this included Facebook posts, text messages, WhatsApps, Reddit threads, all these sorts of things. We were able to create a large language model or fine-tune the model by feeding it this information. So we basically created an AI model that became an expert in identifying scams. It's also got something known as RAG, who some of you, if you're engineers or work with AI systems, you might be familiar with that term. But RAG is essentially kind of like a dynamic brain of the model. So if there's new research that one of your organizations puts out and it's publicly available, our model could incorporate that research to improve its understanding of the threat landscape. Or if there's new information that a law enforcement agency gives us, we are able to train the model in real time. We don't have to build the model all over again. So there is obviously a lot that you need to do to make sure that you're using AI ethically. And for our purposes, for Sago, we conduct regular performance audits. We have gender and cultural sensitivity training modules. So we basically trained the model on how to be gender and culturally sensitive based on training resources from UNODC, UN Women, and Interpol. As I mentioned, the training data is continuously updated to make sure that it's up to date and reflects current best practices. And we have conformed to the IEEE standards on ethical use of AI, which is a voluntary designation, but it's something we thought would be important. There's a lot of room that there's a lot of work that needs to be done when it comes to the regulation of use of AI for countering scams or really for countering any security threat. And I think like every company in the space, we would welcome more regulation because it would actually make life easier for us and tell us exactly what standards our system needs to meet. Because right now, this last point we did on our own, but we didn't even have to. And there's nothing stopping a company from building an AI system that is not abiding by any ethical guidelines because most countries don't have any laws about this yet. But fortunately, I think in our sector, in the social services, people are pretty attuned to this and would take it pretty seriously. So that pretty much concludes my presentation. By the way, if you want to check out the chatbot, you can just scan this QR code. It should give you a link to chat with Sago. If you're having any issues, just let me know. We can share the number to chat with Sago as well. But please feel free to share Sago as a resource with your communities, with your stakeholders, anybody who you think would benefit from it, with your parents, with your in-laws. There's I mean, my parents have benefited tremendously from being able to have a chatbot they can talk to and ask if something is a scam or not. And I would love to just sort of use the remaining time that we have to open it up for questions and make this more interactive if anybody wants to share something or ask a question.
So we do have some questions in Huba. If you have other questions, go ahead and throw them in there. We have about 450 people online, so we do all of our questions through that. First up, what has surprised you the most in your work, either about how scam networks operate or how people respond to interventions they read, learn, or try first?
Respond to interventions that what?
Oh. Where did it go? Oh, there it goes. What has surprised you the most in your work, either about how scam networks operate or how people respond to interventions driven by AI?
Oh, driven by AI. Sure. That's a great question. Thank you. The number one thing that has surprised me about how people respond to interventions driven by AI is it's much more positive than I thought. And I say this, I know I have a bias. We're obviously developing AI solutions, but through focus groups that we've done, so I'll give you another example. There's another tool my company has made called Aldis, which is a similar system but for combating terrorist recruitment and terrorist ideology. So Aldis is a chatbot that former terrorists can talk to in rehabilitation camps. These are people who used to fight for ISIS or for other groups and are now in like a rehabilitation camp in Syria or Iraq, run by the government, where they have to talk to human counselors who are checking in on them and saying, I hope you're not getting radicalized again, that sort of thing. So this is a chatbot we created that they can talk to anytime they're having doubts or questions, and it will guide them on the path to sort of nonviolence and away from terrorist ideology. When we released this, we gave it to about 80 people who used to fight for ISIS in Iraq, and we gave them this WhatsApp chatbot that they could talk to. Our hypothesis was that maybe 25% of them, maybe about 20 of them, would actually want to talk to the chatbot, right? Most of them would probably say, I don't want to talk to a chatbot. These are people in their 30s, their 40s. They're obviously not using technology a lot. They lived as ISIS members for 3 years. But what we found is that 87%, after 4 weeks of using it, said not only do they like talking to the chatbot, they would prefer talking to the chatbot than to their human counselor. And when we asked them why, the two reasons that came up most were, number one, it's always available. Even if I have a bad dream at 3 in the morning because I have PTSD, I can talk to the chatbot. It's available. It'll talk to me for 3 hours. But a human might not be available all the time. And number two, the chatbot never gives up, right? Like if you are arguing, have you ever tried arguing with a chatbot? Just argue with it about something. It will never stop. You will be the person who puts your phone away. It is programmed to never stop. And so ironically, the way I think about it is like AI doesn't give up on people the way people give up on people, right? The number one reason, if you have a relationship in your life, like maybe somebody who's a little difficult, who you find yourself arguing with a lot, a boss, a colleague, a sister, a brother, a husband, a wife, the number one reason is usually that like one person in that argument gets frustrated and just doesn't want to do this anymore after a certain point. But a chatbot would never give up. It would never get frustrated. No matter what you say to it, it'll always be there to listen to you. So that kind of, it sounds obvious now, but when we were trying this out, that I hadn't thought that that's how people would react. And again, I think we are even asking this question because we are the older generation using AI. But people who are being born today, if you have young children in your life, they will grow up in a world where AI is so normalized. I promise you, if you are someone born in Gen Alpha or Gen Beta, so after around 2013, in your life you will have an AI boss. You will have AI employees. You will have an AI teacher, maybe even an AI girlfriend or boyfriend. My nephew, who's in 6th grade in Singapore, at the American school in Singapore, told me that 2 boys in his class have AI girlfriends. And I said, what do you even do with your, you don't even know what you do with a real girlfriend. What are you doing with an AI girlfriend? And they said nothing. They just talked to it about like, you know, did you like this movie or would I like, I mean, they just treat it like a friend. They don't really know what they're doing, but they are so comfortable talking to AI. And of course, their parents are shocked. How can you talk, how can you sit there and have a friendship or a romantic relationship with an AI? But it's going to be, I promise you, you know how in our generation, like you would talk to your grandparents, your parents, and they would say, no, gay marriage, it has to be between a man and a woman, and you'd say, no, love is love. You will have that same conversation with your grandchild when they say, oh, so what if I want to marry an AI? You say, no, it has to be 2 humans. So I think this is only going to get more and more normalized.
All right. The next question we have is, If someone wanted to explore this intersection, AI and human rights or security work, what would you recommend they read or learn or try first?
I am a big believer, and if you want to understand AI, don't start with the technical stuff. You don't have to be a technical person to understand this technology, and that's really important and really unique, because there is no other technology for which that is true. If you want to be a rocket scientist, you have to understand science. You have to understand physics and chemistry and math. But if you want to develop AI systems, you don't have to have an engineering background, because artificial intelligence is about creating intelligence. So the best AI people that I know, the people who have the smartest ideas and who are doing the most interesting things, are actually not technical people by background. They don't understand technology. What they do understand is human beings. Because this is a technology that is all about creating an artificial human being. So the number one thing you have to understand to do that is real human beings. And so I would encourage them to read people like Geoffrey Hinton, who started out as a scientist, a brilliant scientist. He is considered one of the godfathers of AI. He just won the Nobel Prize last year for his work inventing deep learning and neural networks, which is the science behind how ChatGPT and all these other models work. But if you listen to his talks now, he sounds like a philosopher. He sounds like a sociologist, right? Because he's realized, and he says this, he says, I thought I was building a machine, but now I realize we were actually building the human mind. And so he's devoted his life now to trying to understand human behavior and psychology. So I would say, listen to people like him, read books on psychology, read books on sociology. That will prepare you much better to think about these AI systems. Because the technical part, how do I code this, code, anyway, the need for that is going down. My company used to have 16 engineers working for us. Now we have about half that number, simply because the work of 20 engineers can now be done by 10. That's just a fact. Because of vibe coding. Many of you have probably heard of that, right? Where you kind of code a little bit, but you basically ask Cursor or OpenAI, all these other tools to do the coding for you. So eventually, the only thing that humans are going to be good for is ideas, because the execution AI is getting better and better at. You know, sorry to make this very long, but I think the audience would like this. At that same dinner there were a few people from OpenAI. And what they were saying, this OpenAI, of course, is the maker of ChatGPT. And one of them was somebody who worked very closely with Sam Altman, who's the founder of OpenAI. He said, you know, we believe, and Sam believes, that very soon you're going to start seeing brain gyms. I said, well, what's a brain gym? He says, well, think about it. 2,000 years ago, you didn't need gyms because human beings did a lot of exercise in the day just in order to survive. You had to hunt, you had to fish, you had to build your own home, you had to walk 3 miles just to get water. But now, because of technology, all the physical labor has been outsourced to machines. We don't walk, we take cars. We don't have to hunt for our food, we go to the grocery store. So we don't have a way of exercising our body's muscles, and so we created this artificial thing called a gym, where we run and we lift weights just to exercise our muscle, not for any practical purpose. Think of how crazy a gym would have seemed to a caveman. You know, he spends his whole life trying not to run or trying to run less. And here you have these people paying lots of money every month so that they can run. Similarly, they believe that all intellectual labor is going to be outsourced to AI. And so you won't need to use your brain through the normal course of a day. So you will have to go to a brain gym where you will do puzzles and you will do crosswords and things like that just to use your brain so you don't lose that muscle. So that's kind of like where we're headed in terms of trying to understand the technical aspects of this is useless because the AI is going to be doing the technical stuff anyway. And the last point on that, the other reason why I'd say don't bother investing in a degree in machine learning or something is because even the people who invented this stuff do not understand how it works. That's a very important point that I think gets lost in this debate. We think of, oh, Sam Altman, he's an AI expert. Jeffrey Hinton, he's an AI expert. Sundar Pichai at Google, they understand. They don't understand. They say it themselves. Listen to their interviews. No one understands how neural networks actually ingest information. We know how to train the model. We know that when we show it an image of a cat, it understands what a cat is, but we don't actually understand the technical mechanism through which it picks up some knowledge and doesn't pick up some knowledge. Nobody in the whole world understands how this works, which also makes it scary and dangerous. Think about it, we are building something. The whole world is putting trillions of dollars into building something that we don't even understand. And furthermore, the thing we are trying to build, intelligence, even human intelligence, is something we don't understand. Can anybody in this room give me a definition of consciousness, of intelligence? It's impossible. If you can, you'll be the first person in history. So for those reasons, I'd say the philosophical side, the sociological side is far more important than the technical side.
Thank you. I have a few really specific questions about Sago. The first one is, will it be used to combat recruitment of trafficking victims into scam centers in addition to reducing exposure to fraud? If so, is there a digital literacy barrier to overcome when targeting vulnerable groups as intended users of the product?
Great question. The amount of digital literacy that it would take to use this is being able to use WhatsApp. So there is a little bit of a barrier. There are some communities, of course, that are not online enough where giving them a WhatsApp bot would help. But I would argue that those are not the communities that scam centers are targeting for recruitment anyway. So that's kind of the way we are thinking of it in terms of digital literacy.
In its development, what have been the biggest challenges in staying ahead of scammers who constantly evolve their messaging to evade detection? And what key metrics do you use to measure and ensure the AI adapts as quickly and effectively as those attackers?
Yeah, great question. So the challenge is, of course, that as you all know, scamming tactics change very fast. So how does our bot stay up to date with those? One is through retrieval augmented generation, that RAG system that I told you about. So when we pick up new scams or new research from outside, we can feed that into the system very quickly. But the second is something called RLHF, reinforcement learning with human feedback. So basically, and again, this is one of those mysteries of AI that even we don't really understand how it works, but we do know that the system gets better the more data it sees and the more it's used. So we have actually seen in the last 3 months especially, there's a new type of scam going around in South Asia. Actually about 6 months ago, it started really getting more and more popular, called digital arrests, where people would pretend to be a police officer video calling you. They'd wear a police uniform and they'd say, you have been, your account has been seized for some money laundering thing, whatever. And you'd say, no, it's a misunderstanding. They'd say, well, your bail is set at 10,000 rupees. You can pay using this link. And a lot of people would fall for it. Interestingly, about 3 months before the first known case of digital arrest scams, Sago started almost predicting that would happen, and started warning users about potential misuse of law enforcement impersonation. And even at the time, we were like, why is it saying this? Like, we've never fed it any examples of scams like this. But what it was doing is it was looking at how scammers have been evolving in the last few years, and based on that, it had some predictions about what else they could do. And one of those predictions turned out right. So that's another way we try to stay ahead of it, is just by letting the model predict as well.
What other languages can be used?
So it can use over 86 languages right now, so pretty much every major language. The only places where it struggles a little bit more is very, very localized dialects. So for example, if you are using Tagalog or you are speaking in Thai, no problem. But maybe if you speak in Thai the way people in Patani speak in Thai, which is slightly different, they might use certain different words, it wouldn't be as good at understanding that. However, the more it's used by people of a certain dialect, the better it gets at that dialect.
For the tech companies who are leading AI product development, how much are they interested in or planning for mitigating the negative effects of AI, particularly the decentralized vision for the tech space, where accountability would also be removed or decentralized?
So we don't have anybody from a tech company in the audience, do we? From Google, Meta, or anything? Okay, good. Then I can speak freely. But they,
You are being recorded, just so you know.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, full disclosure, we partner with the tech companies. We've received funding from them. But I say this to their face as well, is that I don't know. Okay, I think they are doing a lot now on countering scams by their standards. Like the funding in this area has increased significantly. I would say over the last 2 years, attention has increased. More and more senior people at Meta and at Google are getting involved with anti-scam efforts. What is their motivation? I don't know, right? Are they doing it because it's a public relations exercise? Maybe. Are they doing it because they genuinely want to protect their users? I hope. Or are they doing it because of government pressure? Realistically, it's probably a combination of all three. Is there more that they could be doing? Absolutely. And I think one thing that's more that they could be doing is creating more preventative measures. They don't have to partner with us on our bot, but they could create their own version of this, right? Arguably, they have even more data than us. But I think they're hesitant to do anything that would even slightly negatively impact user adoption, right? So that's the tricky balance with them. And in all fairness, I understand that. I understand the balance they have to strike between being a company with an engaging product and warning people of the risks. But where I think there's tremendous potential is that scams, at least right now, is not a politicized topic. And I know that I'm saying that in Thailand, and I've been reading the news about Thailand and Cambodia, so obviously there are ways that this intersects with politics, no doubt. But for most of the world, it's not so much a left-wing, right-wing issue. Like, say, misinformation, disinformation. In my country, in the United States, that has become a very polarizing term, right? Everybody on the right thinks that this is disinformation. Everybody on the left thinks, no, that's disinformation. So it's become very politicized. Scams are still not that politicized. Everybody, whether you are a right-wing politician or a left-wing politician, can agree that scams are bad. And so I think we have this great opportunity with the tech companies and with political stakeholders right now to make the case. And this is what I would encourage everyone in the room to do. This is how we have found success getting funding for this, is whenever we talk about it, we say, look, this is one of the few issues that is totally not political. Terrorism is political, misinformation is political, gender becomes political, but scams, thank God, at least for right now, is not a left-wing, right-wing issue. So it's something that you should be able to get political and corporate consensus on.
Still have a few more here. Were there any preliminary data sources you used for training Sago, or is it built solely on what users have submitted so far?
Yes, there were preliminary sources we used. So the number one was our own database of scams that we had collected from programs that we ran with UNODC, with UN Women, with the US State Department, where we basically were involved in some of the shutting down of scam compounds. And so we got access to their data, to their tactics, to their methods. So we used a lot of that for training it, as well as open source research, just publications and news articles. But I'd say now that we've got a significant volume of users, the user data is proving to be the best way of training it.
So do you need to partner with government or non-governmental organizations to increase the adoption of Sago, or do you envision the user base to grow organically also in developing country contexts?
Also in which context?
Developing country.
Developing country, thank you. Yeah, again, great question. I think both would be good. We want it to grow organically and we want to partner with governments. We are launching a campaign. I mean, it's not public yet. So I won't name the company, but we are launching a campaign that will be reaching users in all 5 countries, in 5 countries to start, and then 10 countries by the end of the year. And this is with a major technology company, and they will be giving 30% of their users access to Sago. So overnight, that will lead to hundreds of thousands of new users. So I think partnerships with companies, partnerships with governments are always helpful, but partnerships with CSOs is incredibly useful, not just to increase adoption, but to make sure that our research and the data that we're training it on is also sound and up to date.
That's cool. Do you have a couple of examples of recent human trafficking related scams that we should be aware of?
Yeah, trafficking-related scams, what we're seeing is an interesting change. So about 2 years ago, we were noticing, and I'm sure all of you were too, a lot of pig butchering compounds or scam compounds in Cambodia and Myanmar and Laos, and they were trying to hide the fact of what they really are, right? So a lot of the job advertisements would say, we are recruiting a translator or a customer support specialist or something, and they would be very vague. They wouldn't really say who they are. Now what we're starting to see is a few ads on Facebook especially that are basically openly saying this is they're not calling it a scam compound, but they're saying this is a call center in, Irrawaddy or in a certain region where you will have to do 18-hour shifts, you will have XYZ, but these are the plus sides. And so it's an interesting shift we're seeing, and I wonder if other organizations in the room are seeing this from an on-the-ground perspective too. It almost seems like they're not hiding the fact anymore, and it's moving less from a trafficking model to more voluntary, like if you want to do this work, come do it, because we are seeing a lot of people voluntarily wanting to do this kind of work. Even some people who were initially trafficked and then get, somehow leave those scam compounds do sometimes come back on their own volition. So maybe the scam centers are trying to take advantage of that. And it also is a way to get around the tech companies' algorithms. So I'd say that that's becoming that's one of the sneakier things they're doing, which is making it harder to spot typical recruitment ads.
All right, unless we get some more, this is the last one. Can the chatbot detect relational scam in early stage before asking for money?
Detect like which stage of the scam it's at?
It says detect relational scams in early stage. In other words, before asking for money.
Yeah, I think so. The example that I showed online, actually, if you share a scam with it, it can easily say, it'll never, for legal reasons, it will never say this is definitely a scam, because nobody can prove that. But it will say this has lots of signs that make it look like it might be a scam, and these are the signs, well before the scammer asks for money.
Awesome. I think that's all, unless anybody has something to submit now. Cool. Fascinating.
Did you ever? Cool. Well, thank you then very much. I'm around. If anybody does have any questions later on, please come find me. Thank you all very much.